from this end. It is recording.
Okay.
Let's go ahead now.
Shall I continue? Shall I proceed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen on the internet. The interwebs have spoken, and we can begin. I'll just start by reading the preamble for this panel, and it goes like this. In many countries in Africa, writers face various degrees of oppression and harassment from political authorities and those who are just intolerant of freedom enjoyed by creative artists and ventilate their ideas in the service of society. On occasion of the 25th anniversary of the state murder of the writer, activist Ken Saro Wiwa, CORA collaborates with POWER to reflect on the state of affairs on the continent with the objectives of exploring means by which writers could best ensure personal safety while protecting the integrity of their works. Our panelists today are Professor Bill F. Ndii, poet, playwright, storyteller, critic, fellow of the Booker T. Washington Leadership Institute at Tuskegee University, and author of over 34 books in diverse genres. He is presently Professor of Modern Languages, Communication, and Philosophy, and Faculty Senate Chair of Tuskegee University, Alabama, USA. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very, very much. I would like to greet my fellow panelists and also greet my students. I see most of them here, my fellow colleagues at Tuskegee. They are also very present. I cherish their support and I will not take it lightly. I would also want to give a shout out to say booksellers, book editors, the writers present on the panel, the Pan-African Writers Association, ladies and gentlemen, lovers of books and lovers of African literature. I really welcome you and look forward to engaging with you on discussions about oppression when it comes to writing. I might even have to extend it to Black writing worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see you're also a lover of nature. Is your background in anything to go by?
All right. My background is everything to go by. It is the foothills where I was born and where I experienced oppression myself in the early days as a young man.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Next panelist is John Rusimbi, writer, former member of parliament from 2002 and the end of transitional government, until the end of transitional government in 2003. And I believe that's in Uganda. He's currently chairman of, that's Rwanda. He's currently chairman of the Rwandan Writers Association, vice chairman of the Power of Pan-African Writers Association in charge of Central Africa, and representative of Power in the African Union African Writers Conference that takes place every 3 years. Welcome to John Rusimbi.
Thank you very much, moderator. I thank fellow panelists. I thank Power. I thank you, the moderator. I thank all the participants that have come to engage with us on this very sensitive issue of oppression writers in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I see you look like you might be in your office, huh?
Yes, please. I'm in my office, yes.
Do we have our next panelist? Is Isabella here? I'll just introduce her. She's scheduled to be at this panel. She's writer, gender and feminist activist, active with the African Feminist Forum. Her writings have appeared in several short story anthologies, including Black Granite in African Sexualities, The Missing, All Parts of Me, and Message in a Bottle. She also has a background in print, radio, and television journalism, having worked with Reuters news agency from 1991 to 2001. Welcome, Isabella. I guess she is not.
She is not present. She doesn't seem.
She's not present. We have a Manuel today. Oh, wow. Well, so I'm going to start with, is Dr. Wale also going to be participating, or will you be representing him, John Rusili?
He's participating. He's a speaker.
Good. So maybe we can start with him. I mean, what has Power been doing for those people who have been oppressed in the past? And what is it doing today to support writers across the continent? While we wait for, oh, is he?
Okay. Hello, John.
Hello, Dr. Wale. Hello. I mean, what we can do is maybe because John Rusimbi is also on the team, is also on the group of Power. Maybe John can talk a bit while we set up Dr. Wale. Maybe you can answer what Power has been doing in the past and what it's doing today. Hello.
Mr.
Hello.
I can talk.
Yes, you're waiting for John Rusimbi to talk.
Yes, please.
So I'm asking you.
Well, Power.
Yeah, answer the question.
Yes, Power has been in existence for quite
I'm on live, please.
A long time now, and I joined Power.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I joined Power in 2015, and Power was actually active to mobilize writers in terms of coming together, holding conferences, and talking about sensitive topics, including oppression of writers. One thing Power has been emphasizing on is solidarity. Solidarity among African writers. Calling upon African writers not to keep quiet when oppression is going on, when writers are being harassed. Not only writers, but even citizens, and citizens are being harassed. You remember those who were following Power recently when the Black American was killed. You remember there was a statement that came from, yes, a statement that came from Power condemning the act. So many other statements have been coming from Power, talking about various forms of oppression to writers and to citizens of Africa. The emphasis has been on solidarity of African writers to speak against that kind of oppression, to speak against harassment of writers and the population of the African people as a whole. Of course, bearing in mind the African we speak.
I'm not sure. Am I the only one who's having a problem with this audio?
He's breaking in and out.
Yes, his audio has a problem.
Okay, so there's no one from Power who can talk about Power. I mean, Professor, as we wait for them to sort out their
I can talk.
Yeah, let's talk, man. As we wait for this guy to
I
sort
can talk about
themselves out.
Power. James, I can talk now.
Oh yes, no, Wale. So I'd asked what
Yes.
what Power has been doing in the past and what they're doing now to support
Yes,
writers
thank you.
who are in conflict and who are in problems.
Yes. Yeah, we, apart from making official statements, Power has always made representations to governments that are accused of harassing writers and journalists. On several occasions, we have sent delegations to intervene in situations. But more than that, we always try to investigate and make inquiries for every peculiar case before we step in, knowing fully well that sometimes the information that we get from the victims are sometimes at variance to what's on ground. But in everything we do, we make sure that we do a good consultation and deliberation before making official pronouncements. But every time we hear of any case of harassment of writers or journalists, Power always step in. And this we have been doing for the past 20-something years since our inception. Even right now, we have had to make inquiries about some current issues related to writers. So this is what we always do. Thank you.
I'm very happy to hear that. John Rusimbi mentioned, for instance, that when George Floyd was called, the Power was also very keen to put its own statement out, saying that this is wrong and Black lives should be valued. And I don't know, you're talking about consulting with other people, but I didn't see any statement coming out when Tinsi Dangaregba or Fokwel Chingono, or when the Lekki massacre happened, I didn't see any statement from Power. Is there a reason for this?
Yes, thank you, James. We made for the James Floyd matter. I wasn't any Secretary General in office at that time, but the committee made a on the James Floyd matter. There was a statement made regarding the Nigerian situation. We did not make any statement at the time because the Ghanaian president had made a statement on we support that statement. And recently, the Zimbabwe writer, we made some inquiries and we were advised by the Zimbabwe Writers Association not to make any statement at that time for some reasons it's known to them, because that was the Writers Association that Tsitsi belonged to.
Oh, so I'm so sorry. You seem to be coming in and out. Maybe I'm missing, or maybe my audio is not good. But
and by the decision of yeah, so that was why we didn't make any statements.
But I don't think you needed to make any. I don't think you needed to make any consultations with anyone to do the statement for George Floyd. Why is it so valuable? Why is it so important to do that for, somebody who lives on another continent and not the people who live on our continent?
Yes, there are some emails, there are some correspondence between us, the Zimbabwe Writers Association, and some other personalities. And we're always very sensitive to what's the dictate of the home association of any writer. Power doesn't want to appear as if we are intervening in some internal issues. That was
Okay. Okay. So unfortunately, your audio is really breaking. And I would also like to bring Professor Lee into this discussion.
Try to respect the decision of the
Hello, Professor Lee.
Yes.
Perhaps I can bring you in at this moment. Your audio seems to be much better.
All right, thank you.
What is your opinion on this? You know, this issue of when lives are on the continent, we have to do consultations with other persons, but when they are not on the continent, we are very happy to put out statements.
All right. Well, the first thing is this: a Black life is a Black life. It doesn't matter whether the Black life is on the continent or out of the continent. I think.
So you can hear me?
Dr. Wale, I mean, I will ask you a bit. Maybe we can have somebody else talking while you sort your audio. Professor Ndi?
All right. What I was just about to say is Black life, whether it is on the continent or on another continent, matters. It is something we should make a statement about. It is true from the little bit I've heard Dr. Wale Okediran say, is that there was a correspondence between Power and the National Writers Association to make a statement. And it is as if Power delegated the powers to make the statement by the National Writers Association. And he doesn't stand the state to answer why that statement was not issued out. I know it is a very contentious kind of issue, especially if Power, without consultation, can make statements about lives on other continents. They should be able to make a statement on any life, the life of any writer threatened on the continent without fear and without favor. It is true, if this has not been the practice, in my very humble position, I will encourage that from now hence, it should be a matter of principle that any act of oppression, because as writers, the act of oppression we fight against is not only oppression against writers. Writers are oppressed. They are oppressed because they dissent. They don't accept the corruption, the oppression that people live within the country. And this is the kind of bitter pill writers give to the corrupt politicians, to the world surrounding them. And as such, they are not wanted. So as an organization for African writers, we should be working in supporting writers who are against this institutional harassment, institutional corruption, which is all the result of either, I say, provincialism or lack of exposure. So I will pause there, and maybe you have other questions. I think within the framework of Power, Power should make it a duty, especially given that we're celebrating the death of somebody who should be alive. I'm talking, there is just so much we can talk about oppression, because just shortly after the murder of Saro Wiwa, I would like everybody listening here to remember, I would like everybody listening here to remember that less than a week after the murder of Saro Wiwa, the Nigerian government, the Abacha government, was going after Wole Soyinka. Yes, less than a week. I know, I watched the events live. I was in Paris at the time. He is being interviewed on on a television in Paris, and they're showing his home in Nigeria with police guards around, waiting for him to be arrested. So it is the responsibility of a federating organization like Power to make a statement when the life of any writer is threatened. And I would finish by saying the threat on the life of any writer anywhere on earth should be the concern of every writer everywhere on earth. Thank you, Mr. Moro.
Thank you, Professor Ndi. John Rusibi, maybe I can get you in here now. You're the person who represents our region at the African Writers AU conference every 3 years. And I would want to know, has Ken Saro Wiwa ever been an issue? Has he ever been something that you thought about in the work you're doing? And what have you been able to achieve with these conferences that happen every 3 years? John? I can't hear you. You're muted, John.
Hello, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Very loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, sir. We sure can.
Yes, please. Now, this African Union, African Writers Conference was an idea that came in 2018 when we met in Ghana. Actually, the African Union looked for power. And we've been looking for the African Union before, and later on, they came to us and they said to work with us on sensitive issues facing African writers. So it was in 2018 that this AU African Writers Conference was put in place. So we are going to, since and the Secretary General, where the two were represent who were elected at that time in 2018. We've had 3 different meetings with the African Union. And the main issues we were talking about was how to promote visibility of the African writings, especially reflecting the Pan-African ideology. But we also talked about the harassment of different African writers. And the African Union representatives were saying that we could always have a joint statement condemning such acts in any country. But for them, they said to have a joint statement, they have to get the consent of the leadership, the whole leadership of the African Union, because in most of those meetings, they were being organized by the head of culture in the African Union. And what we found challenging for the African Union, they work like governments, where every decision has to be approved by the heads of states. So in regard to harassment, it was clear that even though we were talking about joint statements, it remained in the shoulders of power to sort of make such statements. because if you wait for the African Union, which works like all governments, waiting for the approval of heads of states, you may not issue any statement. So I think it's a question of us writers cementing our solidarity and giving the confidence to our own institution power to always condemn.
Okay. Professor, am I the only one with an issue, or
No, we all, he just froze. We all have the same problem. See,
while we wait for them to sort out that little small issue with the, I'm sure they'll jump in.
Yeah.
Would you like to tell us your history in the activism of writers' rights? Do you want to tell us about your story there?
Well, okay, thank you very much. My story, I would like to make it a very personal story, but I would just like to say this. As far as my own bit of activism is concerned, is to actually bring to the fore what African writers, what Black writers have been deploring in their works, to sensitize actually the readership, because there is one thing, conscientization is the most needed. We need to be able to conscientize the people to know exactly what is at stake in African writing. And besides, when you look at what happens across the world, writers in most civilizations, there is a question I've always asked: is there any civilization without a literature? Can we talk of a people actually developing without a literature? We are holding this meeting today, and I'm just thinking, just yesterday, the French actually took the remains of a famous French writer into the Pantheon to honor this writer for the great work and the great achievement they made, okay? But with our African writing, I seem to think the writer writes, speaks while he is alive. Once dead, people don't spend time much on their writing. And what I do and encourage people as my form of activism in support of African writers' activism is to write, to talk about these writers, to make sure that each time, even in my classes, I transform my classes in a place where we have these discussions. We don't just narrow discussions to just the text material. Because if you look at the textbook material, in a way, we cage ourselves. Googie calls it the prison house of European languages. I call it the prison house of Western value systems, okay? We should not cage ourselves in those prison houses. We should step out of it. We have value systems. Our writers are the people who have successfully captured the essence of our value systems. They have documented our memory. They have told our tales, and they've told it loud and clear in such a way that by re-emphasizing it, we can only make a case for ourselves. If we sit and say we're not going to toot our own horns, nobody's going to toot our horns for us. So besides being an activist writing and I strive to make sure that any writer who has suffered any form of persecution because of his writing activism is clearly highlighted. I would pause and give you an example. I have just recently written two separate book chapters, one on the Eritrean or Ethiopian writer Gebreyesus Helu, who in 1927, under Italian colonization, decided to write a very acerbic short novel criticizing his fellow African brothers for joining to fight the white man's war. And what did he do? Gebreyesus Helu decides to write in Tigrinya, which was a novelty. And he writes in the language the people can understand. That is activism. He writes in the language that the colonialist is writing against cannot understand. That's activism. And the other chapter I've written is, I'm still even working on the chapter with my other colleagues, is on Zora Neale Hurston, a Black novelist who ended up dying in abject poverty because of harassment, because of oppression, because publishers would not want to publish what she has written because she had decided to capture Black suffering in traditional Black speak or the way Black people talk. They wanted her to polish the language in a way that is acceptable to the white man's standard. She refused and accepted. And this is one of the things I tell everybody who asks me, what about your activism? The activism, preserve your life, right? If you have a conviction for which you are ready to die. Don't sit on the fence in the face of suffering. Now, if you want to know very personal and intimate detail about my own persecution, I could go into that, but I'll pause here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Wale, Professor D brought up a very interesting thing where he says, you know, when people die, when Africans or Black people die, we don't tend to eulogize or do anything to like really bring them out and celebrate them as much as we could. Perhaps you could tell me what is Power planning to do anything for Ken Saro Wiwa the late? Is there any plans to do anything in his honor? Whether it's, you know, it's a literary prize, whether it's a plaque. Are there any plans for this?
Yes, thank you, James. Yes, we discussed this at our management meeting a few weeks ago on how to honor Ken Saro Wiwa. We want to start by naming one of the structures at the secretariat after him. For example, we already have some notable writers who have some names and some structures in the headquarters named after them. This includes Achebe, Wole Soyinka, Senghor, and a few others. So we plan is for us to renovate the library and name it after Ken Saro Wiwa. And if funds are available, we may take a step further to organize an annual event, whether a lecture or a prize in its honor. This is what we have on ground now.
And of course, Ken Saro Wiwa is not the only one. Professor Ndi just brought, you know, the region writer, and there are a lot of writers who are in this situation where either they've died because of being persecuted, or are there any other plans to, you know, to do anything for those other writers?
I think one of the beauties of this discourse is what Professor India has just said, trying to remind us of the list of writers that should be honored. I think what we do now is that after this event, we have to go back home and start compiling these names. Maybe we'll just make Professor Andy the chairman of the committee to look into that. So it's a good thing that we are being reminded. And I'm happy that Power is such a big organization with complexities, so many issues coming up by the day. And I'm happy that something like this is coming up now. It's giving us an insight into one of the things we need to do. And I'll follow up on this. I promise that.
It's not, it's almost an aside, it's not an aside, but where are the women of power? Because I only hear men names. It's something that I just noticed that whenever I hear it's chairman, whenever I hear it's secretary general, I don't hear any women names. Is there a reason for this?
Well, maybe John can answer that for us.
Maybe
he
John?
He was in power before me. But let me just answer by saying that some female writers have been honored, particularly Amas Asedo in Ghana. She has been honored before. Maybe Shegun has also been honored before. Maybe Shegun is from Nigeria. But I guess the problem is that not many female writers really associate themselves with literary activism. They usually lean before to the men for reasons best known to them.
Let me
I don't know, because
let me beg to differ.
please. Yes.
Well, Dr. Wale.
Yes, please.
I am a student of Helen Sixu, and Helen Sixu is the greatest feminist writer on earth. She is Algerian, and female activism hinging on African womanism or African feminism is not something we can say women are not involved in. We have women writers who, in their activism, to the fore in their writings, the plight of the African woman. And I think we should create, not only create, they deserve, it is not we creating, because they deserve a place at the table when it comes to writing and when it comes to activism. Maybe we are not familiar with these writers.
Exactly.
I also request maybe Power should consider setting up a panel or reaching out to the women that have been honored in the past to identify these women so that they can be part of the whole. Let us remember there is no civilization on earth that thrives without its women, and there is no civilization that thrives without its men. We should come to that consensus. Mr. Muro, thank you.
I agree with you, Prof. And that's why I made you the chairman of the committee. I will get across to you because we need this information, and we are very grateful for it. So
thank you.
Get across to you. Yes.
Hello. James Marwa.
Rusimbi, Africa in power. Am I right? You represent Central Africa?
Hello?
You want me to sit with the ladies? I'm taking away from the ladies.
So, John Rusimbi, you represent Central Africa, no? You represent Central Africa.
Yes, please.
Continent. I mean, we don't hear too much about it.
Yeah, before I answer about that question, I just wanted to compliment Dr. Akodren on the issue of remembering writers who have either died or have been harassed in the past. In 2015, we had an international conference to celebrate the life and works of Chinua Achebe. You all know Chebe also passed through several programs in Nigeria. And when he died, we were actually trying to celebrate his works. That was in 2015. We had an international conference which was held in Ghana. So that was the trend. The trend was that to continue honoring writers that have had an impact on the African continent, celebrating their life and works. So it's power has had its own challenges in the past. Challenges in terms of, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, power has had its challenges in the past. Of course, challenges regarding membership. We're still trying to mobilize different national writers associations in different countries to become members of power. And it was a continuous process since the late Secretary General was in office. And the plan was to mobilize more countries, national association of writers to become members of power and become part of that solidarity of the institution. And since 2015, we had another one international conference about the reading culture and the challenges it has in terms of producing their works and having their works read or being incorporated in the national curriculum. So we cannot say that we've really done much to honor different writers, but we set a precedent where continue from and celebrate the lives of other writers in the continent. So we shall actually support the Office of Power and to see that that solidarity is maintained. More African writers are part of power, and that power can actually do more than it has done in the past.
I just want to jump in. In your earlier submission, you'd mentioned that you are sort of having a partnership with the AU, and that meant that sometimes doing statements in conjunction with them might be an issue. Can power not do their own statements on their own? Do they? Is there agreement that you have to do?
Yeah, actually, maybe I was just it was breaking. You know, my internet was breaking, but I actually we tried in our meetings with the African Union officials. We found challenges, you know, on the side of the African Union because the African Union, whatever decision is passed, it has to be approved by all the heads of states, and power cannot wait for that. So it solely relies in the hands of power to make their own statement. We were trying to sell the idea of joint statements in our meetings with the African Union officials, which we found was not actually working. They have their own structures. They work like governments, you know. So with all the bureaucracies, we cannot wait for that.
I want to ask Professor D to come in here.
Yeah.
And you can start asking your questions now. Huh? The questions are open for you. Professor Ndi, do you mind just giving us a little trajectory of where we've come from since Saro Wiwa? Have you had any progress, or are we at the same space, or are we further back?
All right. Asking about the progress, I would say this. The initiative first, trying to carry a dialogue with African Union, is a step forward. But it is the kind of step forward, you take a step forward and 3 steps backward. Because the African Union, to work in concert with the African Union tells you, well, you must side with your oppressor to agree on what kind of statement to put out. That is not progress. And I think what we should be looking at is setting up or empowering the structure in a way that we can release a statement in any part of the world at any time with neither fear nor favor and without fearing reprisal. Even if we have to fear reprisal, I still contend the writer is a man of conviction. If you are a writer and you don't have conviction, and especially the conviction for which you are ready to die, then maybe your vocation is something else and not writing. Because a true writer must know that there is risk. The word, the tongue, the word is at the origin of everything. And even to Christians, they should remember that the world is existing as a result of the power of the word. And the world can come to stop. The world can stop existing as the power of the word. So back to the question, is there progress? Well, it is work in progress, and we shouldn't relent. We should continue. We should encourage what has started and continue to build. We cannot dismantle what has been started without, we simply build on what has been started. I think that's the catchphrase here, so that we can all move forward and come together as a people.
Thank you, Professor. I have a question from the audience. Danielle Roberts is asking about, she said that people in the US are titled as terrorists when they speak about racial injustice. And she's wondering how people in Africa are affected with this kind of beliefs. Perhaps I'll ask the person who has been at power the longest, because he would know. John, would you like to speak to this question? How people are affected with racial injustice? Is it something that, you know, with your experience, you've seen happening? John Rusimbi?
I might, let me chip in there while we wait for him.
Yes.
For Rusimbi. The idea is, Dr. Okediran pointed out, the murder of George Floyd did not leave the Pan-African Writers Association indifferent. It means Africans are as concerned as ever with what is happening in the United States, just as they are concerned with what is happening in Africa. It is true, maybe when they like this, the statement Power sent out might not have reached the wider audience, might not have been picked up by the mainstream media or talked about, but it doesn't mean that when injustices happen in the US, Africa is completely oblivious to it. That's my take on it. Mr. Rusimbi might have something different or something to add to that.
Wow, yes. Mr. Rusimbi, do you want to add to that? Oh, I guess you.
Yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah. In addition, I want to actually inform you that members of Pan-African Writers Association include those writers who grew up in racist regimes like South Africa. So we always have these members with us in our conferences. They talk about racism. We share about their experiences, and power comes up with resolutions from that particular conference on different themes, including racial oppression and discrimination. So those recommendations are sent to the African Union requesting for action. So we are not really indifferent to racial discrimination. That is an addition to what Professor Ndi has said.
Some news is just breaking. This one is for Wale, Dr. Wale. Some news is just breaking that President J.J. Rawlings is dead. Is there? It's just breaking now. Dr. Wale, would you like to say?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes, it's just breaking here that former Ghana President J.J. Rawlings is dead. Is it something that you think about? Is it something that affects anything you're doing?
It's just been confirmed here in Ghana.
Yes, I'm just seeing this information right now online.
Yes, it's been confirmed here. The news is that apparently he buried the mother about 3 weeks ago, and they said about a week after that burial, he took ill, and then he's been in hospital for the last 1 week. The presumption is that he had COVID. That is what is trending now. Maybe by the end of the day, something official will come. Then we can know.
I mean, the reason I'm bringing him up is because I believe he was the president of Ghana when power was, became power actually was set up in the country. Would you, or it's still too early for you to make anything, say anything about it?
Well, until we hear an official announcement, once we hear an official announcement from the Ghanaian government, then power will make a pronouncement too. But for now, everything is just on social media, and we need to be guided before we make an official announcement.
Oh, okay. I think Professor Ndi.
Yeah.
Danielle was asking about, are they seen as terrorists?
All right, I see. Thank you very much, Mr. Moro. I see Ms. Roberts' question asking whether in Africa, when people protest, they are viewed the same. Because what I was addressing in class with them is the statement Black Lives Matter movement makes out. They are not protesting because they want to end the regime. They are not protesting because they want anarchy. It is just a simple statement. We are taxpayers. We don't want to be paying you to be killing our brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our fathers, our nephews, our grandfathers, and the rest. But the American government immediately catalogs them as terrorists. In Africa, let's not forget, anybody who is willing to speak truth to power, just like Black Lives Matter movement is speaking truth to power, yeah? and decrying the injustices is not well viewed anywhere. We have talked about, the desire for freedom as being the basis for every kind of concern for the writer writing committed literature. And by doing that, on the African continent, I might go from a very simple example. Yours truly sitting here was a stateless citizen for 25 years. All right? Just because in a radio interview, he was questioned, why do you think it necessary to create a bilingual club at the University of Yaoundé in a bilingual country? And my statement was simple. If Cameroon is a bilingual country, I am bilingual. That is admitted. How official is the bilingualism? I am compelled to be bilingual because of my minority status, right? I am English speaking in a majority French speaking country. So there is still need for the promotion of bilingualism. Now I question the journalist. Don't you think it is necessary in a country where bilingualism is only on papers and not in practice? I asked your president, he's been in power for this number of years. Can he withstand a conversation with me for 5 minutes alone in English? If he can, I challenge him to a contest where we have a live conversation for 5 minutes in English. Then he will take on me for 10 hours of conversation in French, nonstop. And I will not stutter. Guess what? That deserved me being styled a terrorist. That deserved my life being put on balance. That deserved my passport being confiscated. That deserved me struggling and escaping out of my country without, I don't need to explain the details of my escape, but the thing is, I ended up sneaking myself into Nigeria and out of Nigeria to France, and I've been traveling the world since then until I became a US citizen. I never held legitimately a state-issued passport from Cameroon. So it is not something you would say, well, in Africa, when you challenge the authority, they give you a pat on the back. No, they don't give you a pat on the back because the challenge you've given them is a dagger you've actually pierced in their hearts, and they are not very willing. It is a very the truth, they say it is a cliche. The truth is bitter and very difficult to swallow, but the writer's duty is to compel the oppressor to swallow the bitter truth or to see the ugly face of his oppressive acts.
I just want to know, that button, is it Make America Great, or what is that button?
Make America Think Again.
Oh, okay. So, I had to confirm.
Actually, Make America Read Again and Make America Think Again.
Oh, okay. Mara Mata.
Yeah, thank you. You got it. It is Mara Mata.
Mr. Rutsimbi, I am going back to your question about, Central Africa, because, we are talking about West Africa. We're talking, what about Central Africa? How is the situation for the writer there? This is for John Rutsimbi.
The situation of writers in Central Africa. Actually, you've had situations like in Burundi, where there have been a lot of upheavals. We've been talking to the national writers there, and you find that the writers there are so much intimidated, and they tend not to speak out their mind. So last time when I was talking to them, trying to mobilize them to be part of power, we were supposed to have a conference when actually the former Secretary General died. We had brought them on board to come to a conference which never took place, so that they are out of isolation. You'll find that most of the writers there are in isolation, intimidated, so timid, and they tend to be so soft in their writings because they fear the state of affairs. Some of them try to be part of the other civil society organizations. We have civil society organizations that have been expressing their opinions on the violence in Burundi, and some of them are forced to actually flee from Burundi, and some of them came to Rwanda, others went to Tanzania, and we've been in touch with them. I personally hosted one from Burundi in my own house for about 3 months, when it was really terrible for them in Burundi. So the situation is not as good in Central Africa, just like in many other countries. But we are trying to have more writers in Central Africa to actually come on board and be part of power, so that we cement that kind of solidarity with them.
Just a question, when you want to be a member of power, do you have to be a member via an affiliation, or can you be a power member as an individual?
No, actually power recruits as national associations. National associations are the ones that are supposed to be members of power. Unless the constitution changes. Currently, we look to national associations.
Okay, so there are 50-something national associations who are members of power. Was I not clear? I'm saying, so there must be 50-something national associations who are members of power. Is that how it works?
That is, yes, that's what should be. But currently, not all associations have actually registered to be part of power. Not all associations.
Dr. Wale, you became the leader at power this year, and we are always asking our leaderships to to be transparent with how they choose their leaders and how long their terms are. So would you like to tell us a bit about how you became the leader at the power organization, and how long your terms are? They 2 terms, or is it? Do you want to speak a bit about that?
Yes, thank you. What happened was that after the demise of the former Secretary General, Professor Atuki Okai, a steering committee was put in place to see to the conveyance of an election to bring in the next Secretary General. But a lot of challenges came their way. There was financial problems. There were issues, just like John mentioned, some national associations that were having problems with power. So it was at the end of 2 years when it was up to 2 years after the demise of Professor Okai, that the council, Power Council, mandated the Senate committee to head hunt for a Secretary General who will come in for a temporary position of 2 years, acting capacity for 2 years, within which that Secretary General will reorganize power and put it in a situation, in a position to be able to conduct the regular AGMs and elections. So I'm a stopgap, and somebody who's been asked to come and clear up the problems in power. So my tenure is for 2 years, at the end of which we hope that things will return to normal.
So as far as human rights is concerned, do you have any plans going forward apart from conferences? Because Power seems to be doing a lot of conferences. So apart from conferences, are there any other plans?
Well, we're actually moving away from the era of conferences. Luckily, COVID-19 has already helped us in that direction to limit physical movement. The other issue we discover is that so some of our young writers are in power because they believe that power has always been revolving around the old and established writers. Secondly, we are also having complaints from Francophone countries who also complain that power is too Anglophonic for their liking. So when we now put this thing together, we're trying to steer a new path for power, a path where we're going to give a lot of attention to other language groups apart from English, and also so that we reduce ceremony and practical in putting things on ground for writers. So what we did was to quickly swing into action by arranging a few Zoom meetings. We've had Zoom meetings with young writers to discuss and generated some action plans for Francophone countries. Again, we're able to get some nuggets of opinions. And more importantly, we have gone into collaboration with some organizations. We are working with British Council. We are working with UN, United Nations Fund for Development and Population Development in areas we can organize workshops and literary competition for the young writers, So, I mean, as of today, we have been able to reach almost all the national writers associations in Africa, French speaking, Arabic speaking, all those, even some Portuguese speaking. So I'm just about 3 months in office, but I think we have got a job cut out for us because we want to reach out to those who over the years have not been reached. So this is what we are doing.
Wow, you've only been in charge for 3 months. I must really laud you. That's a lot of work to be doing in such a short time. Professor Ndi.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Professor Ndi, actually, it's not bad, eh?
No, not at
What
all.
they've been doing.
It is a laudable endeavor. He's been working really hard.
I want to ask you, because you're the one who's based in the US right now.
Yeah.
Please tell us what's happening for African writers in that part of the world. And of course, we're thinking about the human rights aspect. Huh?
All right. There is a whole lot going on in this part of the world. The beauty of it is that the African writer in America has the possibility of writing, has the possibility of publishing. And while he has all of this possibility of writing, publishing in the diaspora, it is a kind of situation which I would like to veer back to the idea of oppression in Africa, because we are oppressed at home. So at home, we are outsiders. We leave home. We come into our asylum in the US. We are still outsiders. One, you are writing with a targeted audience that is never reached. You write, for instance, my publications are proscribed in Cameroon. So my publisher has to make a disclaimer, right? And say, well, the ideas in this book are not endorsed by the publisher. The ideas are those of the author, in order to stay away from legal challenges. Now we write, we have the freedom to express, but at the same time, it is like we are writing to the bemusement of our oppressors, because the oppressors of African writer, let's make no mistake, the oppressor of the African writer is not just the regime in place, it is the neo-colonial states that sponsor the decadent regimes in Africa, so that when you leave where you are and you find yourself as an asylee or as a resident, or even if you end up with a citizenship in another country, your writings, your complaints, your critique against the corruption and harassment would be falling on deaf ears. Because just take, for instance, if not the fact that African Americans live and experience the same kind of things we live and experience almost on a daily basis in Cameroon, right? For any person to read an African author in America would just be like, well, let me do it as an academic exercise, or let me just read it for the fun of reading. It is not like reading to take something. So my issue would be, if power were to empower writers all over the world, because the word Pan-African is not just African. It's not just African. Every Black man everywhere is an African. I remember the reggae musician Burning Spear singing a song, no matter where you come from, as long as you're a Black man, you are not African, you are an African, right? And if we have this Pan-African vision, which Marcus Garvey initiated, right? We should work and encourage every Black man everywhere on earth. And that is where I came in with the idea that the oppression of any Black man anywhere on earth should be the concern of every Black man everywhere on earth. And that is what my take is. And as an African American, or say Southern Cameroonian American writer writing in the United States, I think we have a double bind, because we are in a situation where we are both strangers at home and abroad, we are strangers.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're saying black man to mean black person, because so black, both men and women.
Yes, that's exactly. Thanks for the correction.
Yes.
To be corrected anytime. When I say black man, it is man with capital M. So it engenders men and women.
Okay. Mr. Rusimbi, actually, is there anything you'd like to add in your personal capacity as somebody who's been following this industry for a while? How are we doing human rights-wise? You're still mute.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, I think human rights is the core of every activity that we should do, power should do, engage in. It's very, very important that power also relates and collaborates with other human rights networks around the world. We've had institutions like PEN. PEN, we can relate to PEN International and see what we can work together on in regard to the rights of writers, not only in Africa, but around the world, what we can do together. That's something we can look at as power and see where we can cooperate with PEN International. Because in its objectives, it has the human rights aspect for writers. And also collaborating with other human rights movements, civil society especially, that really work on human rights. It's something very, very important to ensure that the personal safety of a writer is guaranteed without compromising the integrity of the writer's works.
Thank you, John Rusimbi. This one is for Dr. Wale. This is actually a follow-up from Professor Ndi's statement. He said that his work is proscribed. You know, the publisher has to say that, you know, the publisher says that his work is not the work of the publisher. And it's something that happens a lot on the continent. Many writers at one point will produce work that is either banned or proscribed or considered illegal by the state. Is there any plans from the power to maybe do a series of books, or, you know, produce a series, like you know, do something for the books themselves? Because we know that we've been talking about the safety of the writers. What about the work that they've been producing? Are there any thoughts on plans of bringing this to the fore as well?
Yes, thank you. I think firstly, I want to reassure Professor Ndi when he mentioned the fact that power should not be only for African writers. Actually, in the constitution of power, the association is also responsible for all writers of African descent, wherever they may be, whether in the US or in Europe or in the diaspora, anywhere in diaspora. And even because of this, power has a plan to organize a global conference for writers of African descent coming next year, first quarter of 2021. We want to bring, because we've been receiving a lot of complaints from writers of African descent who are looking for platforms on which to showcase their works, and power is a proper place for them to do this. To the question of our plans, yes, we many issues are coming up now, I must confess, which hitherto did not come to our mind, because the first thing that I met when I got into office was how to organize the place, how to look for funds with which to pay outstanding debts. And because according to the AU Charter, uh, every African country is supposed to give power annual subvention. But because many of these countries are behind in the payment of their subvention, not have enough funds. And so that has not allowed us to do some critical thinking or some salient challenges. And that's why I'm very happy that this event is bringing up so many issues related to human rights and the issue of books being proscribed or banned. Or this is something we have to look into. And I'm not joking when I said we're going to need Professor Hindi in this area, because he seems to have a wealth of experience and a wealth of vision. And after this event, I will have to get back to him so that I can put things in perspective and we can start the job. Thank you.
Professor Ndi, you seem to be the chairman of everything.
Well, I'm not going to be the chairman of everything. I have just one head to carry one luggage. I can carry 2 or 3 luggages on the same head. I know multitasking is, one of the challenges every human has to deal with, but we will see. We will do the best we can as far as African writing is concerned.
Yes, Mr. Rusimbi, would you mind sharing some names? Because, this is something that's bugging me. When we talk about West Africa, we know about Saro Wiwa, we know Shoyinka have had issues. He was almost, we know Achebe, East Africa, we know Ngugi, in the north, and we know this Eritrean writer that Professor Ndi just brought up. But who are the writers who, we can say from the Central African region? And first of all, what's Central African region? Because does it include Cameroon? Does it include, who are the Central African region? And who are the writers who have been at the forefront of human rights that we need to be knowing about?
Yeah, well, Central Africa is constituted by Rwanda. Rwanda happens to be in both Central Africa and recently it joined also East Africa. So it's actually even Burundi is in Central Africa at the same time in East Africa. But we have Congo, the Republic of Congo, as part of Central Africa, which also has been trying to join the East Africa. So we have some countries that are part of East Africa and also part of Central Africa. And those are the political directions and decisions that you may not be able to project, and but we have not really had very, very prominent writers like those you talked about, like Ngugi, like personally, when I was a young person, I studied the book of Inka. I studied the books of Ngugi wa Thiong'o in secondary school when I was in exile in Uganda, because I grew up in exile myself. I came to Rwanda after the 1994 genocide, in between there. So we are actually trying to mobilize the writers in Central Africa to come out and join other prominent writers in Africa and the rest of the world.
is it that the, it actually says something. Is it that the writers don't exist, or they have been really oppressed, that those who have voices are not able to say anything?
Can I chip in there really quickly?
Just let him finish about let him ask. You can chip in after I ask him about,
All right.
what.
I'll just like to add to the discussion, the Central African writer, the writers in the Central Africa. So he should finish out.
Yeah, let me finish. Like, what does it say that, we have a whole region of several 100 million, and we don't even have one name from an oppressed person? Mr. Rusimbi, is it something that it worries you?
The writers who have been who have left those countries early enough and went to stay in the Western countries like Belgium and France, especially those from the Congo. Maybe Professor Ndi can chip in to remind me of some of the names if he knows about them.
Okay, Professor, you want to jump in now?
All right, thank you. I was just thinking, because when we talk of the Central African region, it includes Cameroon, and most people should be familiar with the name Mongo Beatty. We should also remember how Mongo Beatty spent his life in exile, and the opportunity he got to come back to Cameroon, he did not last long. He was dead and gone before we could say Jack Robinson. Also, I'm thinking of the Southern Cameroonian writer, Bate Bisson, who was actually killed on the eve of launching a very critical play that he had written against the government. So there is a long list, and Central Africa includes Chad. We have Chadian authors. We have authors. The thing is that we are too many that, like we say, we have too many writers that the good ones even get lost in the forest of, he said the human rights writers get lost in the midst of the praise singers, because we hear the praise singers, and this is something I would like to address maybe off the air. We cannot be striving to rally people and trying to see that we have the endorsement or the avowal of the oppressor. The oppressor will never be for us, okay? Because the oppressor does not come to the table in the position of weakness. You are coming to the oppressor's table in the position of weakness. So that's what I just wanted to add. I know very well that there are many writers, just a little bit of research, you would see the long list. Mobutu did not reign over Democratic Republic of Congo for 30-something years just by giving a pat on the back of Congolese writers. No, there are a slew of them that were hanged. There were a slew of them that faced the firing squad. When you say something in the context of Africa as a writer that is not pleasing to the regime in place, what is said is that you are an agitator. You are a radical. You are a rebel. Then they bring up all sorts of terms. And it brings me, I have to bring into the discussion something that I really want anybody watching me, like what is happening in the Cameroons, where British Southern Cameroon is being annihilated in the face of the universe and nobody is saying anything. There are summarily more than 400 villages destroyed, nobody is saying anything. But when you write about it, oh, immediately, he's a separatist. He's a secessionist. Mm. You don't even think that. I think as a writer, I think as a linguist, I think as somebody, a language engineer who uses words on a daily basis. If you say there is separation or secession, there must be a treaty of union. There cannot be a divorce without marriage. So we should look into it with a critical eye and remember that even if we are not aware of the existence of some of these writers, a little bit of research would tell us these are people of critical importance. These are people we should pay attention to. Thank you, Mr. Mura and Mr. Rusundi.
Thank you, Professor. I see we are into the last 10 minutes of the session, and I'm going to be asking you to prepare your closing statements. But this is for Dr. Wale. The professor just brought this up. You know, the continent there is a shift happening right now on this continent. You know, there are rumblings. I mean, there's been protests in Nigeria. There have been protests in Mozambique, in Namibia, in Ethiopia is looking crazy right now. Where is the place of power in all of this?
Well, I think power has now realized that a substantial percentage of the population in Africa are the young people. And these young people are very energetic, they are restive, and if you don't take care of them, they could implode. And that is why power wants to put in place special program for young writers. And we have commenced this activity by reaching out to all our national associations to compile the names of their members. The other thing that we also need to do is to encourage good governance and democracy in all our African countries, because without this, the restiveness and the disturbance will continue. And this we can do by putting in place some of our seminars that we include issues relating to democracy and good governance. And at the same time, to continue to speak out against oppressive. Having said this, we also have to be aware that it's not our duty to spoon feed any young writer or pamper them, because many writers of our generation also have to put in their own efforts.
Okay.
Then know that power also needs to reach out to governments in Africa for more support, because under the AU agreement, each African country is supposed to contribute to power on a yearly basis. But somehow, many of our African leaders don't appreciate anything about literature or culture or human rights. So we need to find a way of reaching them and encouraging them. So this is what we are doing.
Okay, so we are now into closing statement area. I'm going to ask you to do it. We'll start with Dr. John Rusimbi. We go to Professor Bill and Dee, and then Dr. Wale, you'll wrap it up. So,
are you not taking questions?
Hello, James.
Yes.
Okay, please, Dr. Henry Tatangang is there and he wants to speak. I don't know, before they make their closing, or is that the way you plan it?
What I would like for the closing statements to be done. Then I'll hand it over to you, and you can allow him to be one of the speakers.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, John Rusimbi, please, closing statement.
One thing, first of all, I thank you, James, for the moderation. And my colleagues on the panel, Professor Lee, for the great ideas put forward. I specifically want to thank Dr. Okedrin. The 3 months he has been in office has actually brought life to power. A lot of discussions, those who have been following discussions on online discussions, you realize that actually he has come in with a new energy to bring about, progress in power. And more people have been mobilized actually to be part of power. So Dr. Kadran, we are behind you, and we shall work together to actually bring changes and improve the operations of power. Very important that power will have to be engaged in is to ensure, first of all, that the safety of African writers is actually guaranteed. We have to speak out, we have to fight for the African writers, not only the African writers themselves, but even their works. There's time in one of the conferences we're asking ourselves, why do we still have Western literature in the curriculum of African countries when we have African writers that are at the same standard? Why don't we really bring on board the African Writers series, their works in the national curriculum, because that's a way of empowering the writers themselves and even the African publishers. So it's a war we shall have to continue fighting. Resource mobilization for power is also at the forefront, as Dr. Kodran said. Countries, governments are supposed to contribute, but they're not doing it. We have to find an alternative way of actually mobilizing other development partners apart from our governments, other development partners, as other civil society organizations do, to ensure that power has that power of financial power, the moral power to push the institution forward to realize its own objectives. Thank you, everybody. I've been happy to be with you on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John Rusimbi. Professor?
All right, thank you very much, and thanks everybody attending this presentation. My closing remarks will take 2 phases. I would first of all want to underscore that there is on the African continent or in the Black world what we call the anti-free thinking and anti-progressive thinking that has been entrenched in these parts of the world. And it is so done through the conscious cultivation of ignorance, what we call agnotology. And I see power as a force working against that anti-free thinking and anti-progressive thinking that is entrenched. For that, I laud power. And I would, while taking from what Dr. Okediran said, we don't have to spoon feed the young generation of writers, but we also have the obligation to let writers know that writing is a medium for unleashing memory and its reconfiguration into artistic images, as well as a medium of providing orientations for the masses that are oppressed. So to speak, oppression becomes some sort of an ill-conceived pressure, even if we expect it from quacks and charlatans, for whom truth needs not to see the light of day, we should understand that it needs desperate alleviation. The desperate alleviation is what power is doing. And we should also realize that oppression, harassment, stifling of writing is like a metastasized cancer whose diagnosis bring in its train more fear and problems than if it had been dealt with initially. I'm saying this, echoing the sentiments of Mr. Rusimbi, talking about the writers in Rwanda so scared that they can't say anything. They should say it now. They should not let it, because by the time they want to say it, we are in the genocide phase number 2. We shouldn't be there. So privation of freedom of expression is something that throws out decency. We shouldn't throw out decency. And I can recall in the Cameroons, a gendarme, that's the military police, man, who dares to call intellectuals microbes, okay? Just as he's about to arrest some group of intellectuals. So I can only sum up African writers' travails and suffering under oppression with 2 words: gruesome ordeal. And on the last note, I make a case. I am reading a poem which I title Our Case. That's the case for the African writer. And it reads, the title, Our Case: kill our earthly stars. What will you do to the heavenly ones? To protect yourself, grease the soldier's elbow. What shall you do when death knocks at your door? Bring us the opposition in the coffin, but will you let us freely mourn? You kill our poets. Do you believe we will bury their writings? Bury yourself amidst a zillion soldiers. Haven't you learned from Chinese history? Like you in China, one did this. Did he not rot on the ground? You sum your world with law and order. Why let lawlessness and disorderliness reign? You are God to those who buy your favors. Who or what are you to those who strip of basic rights? Every night you go to sleep on your king-size bed. Why not make your heart the size of your bed? You ruin the nation to live in a mansion. What space in it or our minds do you occupy? You've dominated the nation tyrannically. Shall you be the tyrant that will kill death? We thought to rule was to serve. Why must a tyrant like you be served? Now, to yourself, you've gathered the nation's wealth. Won't you give us the right to determine the future of our misery? You push your tyranny, your greed, and grip of power to the last. Won't you still be proven wrong from beginning to end? You may never stand in front of a court to plead guilty, but which criminal supersedes you? With your sentence as long as life, shall you in your death that rule over us? You may never see this as a case, but here are we not free to rest our case? Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Professor Ndii. That's a very, very good way of wrapping your statement.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it to Dr. Wale to wrap the official, to close the official statement before we allow Dr. Henry to make his submissions. So Dr. Wale, over to you.
Okay, thank you, James. Well, I want to thank Labaf Lagos Fair for giving us this platform to organize this very important event. I want to thank the moderator and the contributors for such a rich dialogue, which I've enjoyed a lot and which has given power a lot of insights and suggestions on the way forward. And like I said, I will find a way of getting across to so that we can continue this conversation. John Sumbi in Rwanda, thank you for your comments, and we'll be in touch so that we can continue the work of power. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wale. I'm going to hand it over to Labaf, who will now give our other guests a chance to have a chat. And thank you so much, Labaf, for asking me to moderate. And thank you for the panelists who are very good.
Thank you very much, James. As I wrote to you privately, you couldn't have asked for a better moderator. So you need to get someone with this vast experience to do this job. Thank you very much. Before I will thank the rest of the panelists, let me quickly recognize the presence of Dr. Henry Tatangang, and he's going to make a submission now. We try to make it brief and concise so that we can wrap up, because we ought to have finished at 3 o'clock. This is 3:10. So let's say we give ourselves the next 4 or 5 minutes to do the final. Thank you. I think his audio is. Hello, sir. Your audio, please. Your audio. Or is it only me? Because I can't hear him and he's speaking.
No, I can't hear him neither.
Okay.
No, he's mute. Oh, he had been muted. I think there's an issue with his audio.
All right.
Oh yeah, he's muted again.
Oh, please unmute, sir. Unmute yourself, sir. Okay. Oh. I think exactly what happened to Dr. Okedron at the beginning. Or do you want to go off camera and then maybe it will improve?
No, it is not about on camera or off camera.
Okay, it is. Okay, maybe while he's.
Ask if he has an earpiece, he should disconnect the earpiece.
Oh, okay. Can you use your earpiece, sir? Okay.
The earpiece should be removed instead.
Oh, okay. Can you remove the earpiece? All
Yes, I get you very well.
Yeah, okay. We can hear you now.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. I thank you very much for this important meeting, because I see up to 45 people in attendance. I want to end up, since you are towards the end, with a challenge. And the challenge is to ask you, how long do you think we still have the Africa you are talking about? And do you know that it may not be long before we have no Africa, which we can refer to? Because right now, for many of us, talking the way we are talking, we don't have Africa. Let me ask you this question. When the African American whose ancestors were captured from Africa and brought to America, and they identify with Africa and they call themselves African American, where can they go to find the Africa? If any of them got on the plane and flew to the continent that we call Africa, where would they land to call themselves and say they have reached the Africa they are going to? Well, I think that by the time we are recognizing the oppression we have gone through over centuries, we should be fighting the small fights and also fighting the big fight. And the big fight is to ask ourselves, how can we create Africa? I wrote a thesis on Pan-Africanism in 1987. I am 72 years old now. I am in the United States of America. We are talking about oppressors, but we cannot stop the oppressors until we move from the Africa of weak states to Africa of the people who will have power and an economic environment and even a space to move and to read your books and to read mine. I want to refer you to the big fight I am talking about.
You are muted, sir. Okay. You are muted. Hello, unmute yourself, sir.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Okay. I have posted a website, www.vision4d4africa. Go to Vision 4D for Africa so that we enlarge this debate and then work towards what we want and not always fighting against what we don't want. If we are fighting for what we want, we can only get something if we fight for what we want and not what we don't want. We don't want oppression. But how do we end the oppression? We can only end the oppression by transitioning to the people. If we transition to the people and we are in a global society today, we saw the Arab Spring a few years ago. We saw the Arab Spring a few years ago. It resulted just from people connecting themselves by phone. Today we can connect ourselves by Zoom from one African country to another and demand as a people to have a space to move in, to have an economy which is African, because we have a space, 1.4 billion people with $2 trillion of gross domestic product. We can grow that if only we have the space to grow the economy in. Today we have a divided continent, and that divided continent is making Africa not to exist at all. And individuals are buying Africa. Nations are buying Africa. One single Frenchman has almost the entire economy of Cameroon. And we cannot be writing and talking about things just for people to not be able to read, because you can't even read. I just listened to you here talk, and we didn't know who writers in Central Africa were. And this is simply because we are divided, and until we are united, we cannot have Africa that is meaningful, that can grow and become the Africa we want to have. We have all Africas of our dream, but we will die with our dream, even having the means to be able to achieve that dream, just coming together, networking as we are doing in this organization. And I then refer you to another organization, and we have a lot of them in Africa. If we come together, one day we will have Pan-African meetings. And in Pan-African meetings, we will talk strategy on how to transition politically from Africa of states that are weak to Africa of the people, and the people are always strong. If the people were able to deny their leaders the sale of pieces of Africa, they will stop selling. And you can only do that if you have a framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. That was very good. I think you set agenda for the next dialogue that we're going to have. On this note, because Professor Bill Indy has to go, let me quickly say thank you to everybody. The last statement, I think we will take it up and develop into an agenda for our meeting. I wish to thank all the panelists and all the people who stayed with us all through this whole discussion, even in spite of the challenges that we had at the very beginning. Let me start by thanking you one by each. Professor Bill Indy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have to be part of the you have to be part of the next dialogue. John Rusimbi, thank you very much. Dr. Wale Okediran, thank you. Our sister Isabella was not able to join us for Zimbabwe because she kept on getting back on WhatsApp, but it wasn't connected. So James Murua, before I thank you, let me say that you should be preparing for the next session. That will be, we want to write to power that we should have this kind of dialogue every quarter. I will discuss with Dr. Okediran, maybe every quarter or as frequently as we can have it. It doesn't go beyond this. So we can produce some literature, we can get some document together that we can continue to advance this kind of dialogue. I would say in the spirit of Jerry Rollins, in whose tenure power was founded, from what James Murua reminded us, we should take this as a serious assignment, that we form a sort of collective that we continue to distill this kind of idea. CORA will be ready, LAPAF will be ready to partner with power. So James Murua, thank you. Thank you very much for holding the fort. And I thank everybody who is in the house. We're still like 42. And it's like we should not stop, but we have to stop. People have to go.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm Jamal Anikula.
Thank you.
All righty. You have a blessed one.
Thank you. And thank you, Power. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.